The defeat at Earth drove Supreme Commander Riven to madness. He couldn't accept that his forces had been beaten by what he still considered inferior beings. In his rage, he ordered something that would haunt the galaxy forever. On the human colony of New Hope, 5,000 civilians lived peaceful lives, farming and mining on a world far from Earth. They had minimal defenses, just enough to handle pirates or raiders. When the Valkyrie warship arrived in orbit, the colonists tried to surrender immediately. Riven gave them no chance. He ordered the orbital bombardment to begin without warning. Within an hour, New Hope was burning. Every city, every farm, every settlement was destroyed. The 5,000 civilians died in fire and ash. The Valkyrie broadcast the destruction across the galaxy as a warning. This is what happens to those who defy the Empire, surrender, or face the same fate. On Earth, Admiral Jiwoo watched the footage of New Hope's destruction. She watched it alone in her quarters, her face expressionless. But inside she felt something cold and terrible taking root. 5,000 innocent people. Families, children, all murdered to make a point. She opened a secure communication channel to Dr. Hana. It's time. Activate the Harbinger protocol. There was a long silence on the other end. Dr. Jiwoo said quietly, "They killed 5,000 civilians. They're going to keep doing this until we stop them. We have to show them what happens when you push humanity too far." "I understand," Hana replied, her voice barely a whisper. "God forgive us all." The Harbinger protocol was humanity's most terrible secret. Dr. Hana had designed it during the darkest days of the Unification Wars, when it looked like humanity might destroy itself. It was meant to be a deterrent, something so horrible that no one would dare use it. Now they were going to deploy it. The Harbinger was a swarm of nanomachines, billions of microscopic robots that could self-replicate and spread through an atmosphere. They were programmed to target and dismantle anything technological: computers, power grids, engines, weapons, everything that made modern civilization possible. But they left biological life completely untouched. It was a weapon designed to send a civilization back to the Stone Age without killing anyone directly. But the indirect deaths from the collapse of all technology would be catastrophic. Without power, without medical equipment, without transportation or communication, billions would suffer and die. Hana had hoped she would never have to use it, but the Valkyrie had left humanity no choice. A single unmarked human ship slipped through Valkyrie space, using every stealth technology Earth had developed. It took 3 days to reach its target, the industrial world of Calvorn. Over 2 billion Valkyrie lived there, working in factories that produced ships and weapons for the Empire. The ship released the Harbinger into Calvorn's atmosphere and then jumped away, leaving no trace. For the first few hours, nothing seemed to happen. Then small things started going wrong. Communication devices stopped working. Computers crashed and wouldn't restart. Power plants began to fail. At first, the Valkyrie thought it was just technical problems, things that could be fixed. But it kept getting worse. Cars died in the streets. Ships fell from the sky. The planetary defense grid went dark. Within 12 hours, every piece of technology on Calvorn had stopped working. The planet was plunged into darkness. 2 billion Valkyrie found themselves helpless. No power, no heat, no way to call for help. Panic spread through the population. Riots broke out as people fought over food and water. The carefully organized civilization collapsed into chaos. Admiral Jiwoo broadcast a message to the entire Valkyrie Empire. Her face appeared on every screen that still worked throughout their territory. "This is what we did to Calvorn," she said, her voice cold and steady. "We have sent their world back to the Dark Ages without firing a single shot. No one has died yet, but without technology, millions will die from cold, hunger, and disease. And we can do this to any world we choose." She paused, letting that sink in. "We have 30 more Harbinger devices ready to deploy. Every day this war continues, we will darken another Valkyrie world. You want to destroy our colonies? We will send your entire empire back to darkness. You murdered 5,000 of our people. We will make billions of yours suffer." Her expression didn't change, but her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Release Ambassador Taman. Withdraw from all human territory. Pay reparations for the colony you destroyed. You have 24 hours to comply. For every hour you delay, another world goes dark. This is not a negotiation. This is the price of your aggression." The broadcast ended. The galaxy watched in horror. Even species that had no love for the Valkyrie were terrified by what humanity had done. This weapon didn't just kill. It destroyed everything that made modern life possible. It was cruel in a way that went beyond simple warfare. Empress Kalira received the message in her throne room. Around her, her advisors argued frantically. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others demanded retaliation at any cost. The room was filled with shouting and anger. The Empress raised her hand for silence. When the room quieted, she spoke with quiet authority. "Where is Supreme Commander Rivan?" "On his flagship preparing another attack on human space," one of her military advisors reported. "He refuses to acknowledge your summons, Your Majesty." The Empress closed her eyes. Rivan had started this war with his arrogance. He had escalated it with his brutality, and now he was going to get them all killed. "Order all military forces to stand down," she commanded. "Send a message to the humans. Tell them we are willing to negotiate. And send a squad of loyal guards to arrest Supreme Commander Rivan. He is removed from command effective immediately." "But Your Majesty," one admiral protested, "if we surrender now, we look weak. The entire galaxy will see that humans defeated us. We are defeated," Kalira said simply. "The humans have proven they are willing to do anything to win. They have weapons we cannot counter. They have a will we cannot break. If we continue this war, they will destroy us world by world. I will not let pride cost us our civilization." When Rivan received the order to stand down, he refused. He had gathered what remained of his loyal forces for one final desperate attack. He would strike at Earth itself with everything he had. Even if it meant his own death, he would not accept defeat from these humans. His fleet jumped toward the Sol system. 50 ships, all that remained of the forces he commanded. They were battered and damaged, but they were coming for one last fight. On Earth, Admiral Jiwoo detected the incoming fleet. She had expected this. Men like Rivan never surrendered willingly. They had to be broken completely. She opened a channel to Dr. Hana. "Is the solar lance ready?" Hana's face appeared on the screen, pale and drawn. "Admiral, please don't. We've already done so much. If we use this weapon, there's no coming back from it." Jiwoo's expression was hard as stone. "They're coming to destroy Earth, to kill every human alive. I will use every weapon we have to stop them. Now answer my question. Is the solar lance ready?" After a long pause, Hana nodded. "Yes, it's ready." The solar lance was humanity's ultimate weapon. A network of massive satellites positioned around the sun, capable of focusing and directing solar energy into a beam of unimaginable power. It could destroy an entire fleet in seconds, but using it would drain Earth's power reserves and might destabilize the satellites themselves. It was a weapon to be used only once, in humanity's darkest hour. Rivan's fleet entered the Sol system. They moved in tight formation, preparing for battle. The Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, ready to die if necessary. At least he would die fighting. Admiral Jiwoo gave the order. "Activate solar lance, target the enemy fleet, fire." Around the sun, the satellites came to life. They gathered the star's energy, focused it, amplified it, and then they released it in a beam of pure solar fire. The beam crossed the distance between the sun and the outer system in 8 minutes. When it struck Rivan's fleet, the ships didn't explode. They simply ceased to exist, vaporized instantly by temperatures that matched the surface of a star. 50 Valkyrie ships and all their crews were gone in less than a second. The galaxy watched. Every civilization with sensors powerful enough to detect what had happened saw it. Humanity had weaponized a star. They had turned their sun into the ultimate defensive weapon. On Earth, Jiwoo watched the tactical display go dark as the enemy fleet disappeared. She felt nothing. No triumph, no relief. Just an empty coldness where her humanity used to be. In his cell, Taemin heard the news. He bowed his head, grieving for all the dead on both sides. This was what he had tried to warn the Valkyrie about. This was what happened when you pushed humanity to the edge of extinction. They became capable of anything. A few hours later, his cell door opened. Empress Kalira stood there herself, surrounded by guards. She looked older than when he had first seen her image, worn down by the weight of this war. "Ambassador Taemin," she said formally. "On behalf of the Valkyrie Empire, I offer my deepest apologies for your treatment. We wish to negotiate an immediate end to this conflict." Taemin stood slowly, his old body aching from the weeks of imprisonment. He looked at the Empress with tired eyes. "Will you accept our terms?" "We will accept any reasonable terms that preserve our civilization," she replied. "We underestimated your people." Intelligence Officer Thalek couldn't sleep. He sat in his small office aboard the Crimson Spear, staring at the holographic screen before him. Data scrolled past his eyes, information about Earth and its people. What he was reading disturbed him deeply. The humans had been in space for less than 200 years. By galactic standards, they were infants. Their technology was primitive compared to the Valkyrie Empire. Their fleet was small, their weapons outdated. On paper, they should be easy prey. But Thalek had learned long ago that what was on paper didn't always match reality. So he had started digging deeper, looking into humanity's history before they reached the stars. What he found made his blood run cold. Humans had been fighting each other for their entire existence. Not small conflicts, but wars that consumed entire continents. Wars that killed millions. Wars that nearly destroyed their whole planet. He pulled up files on something called World War II. In just 6 years, over 70 million humans had died. They had built bombs that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They had created poison gas, biological weapons, and methods of killing so efficient they terrified him. And that was centuries ago. The more recent conflicts were even worse. The Unification Wars had lasted 30 years. Nearly 2 billion humans had died before the survivors finally created a single world government. The tactics they had used, the weapons they had deployed, the sheer brutality of it all. It was beyond anything the Valkyrie had ever experienced. Thalek leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. The humans weren't weak. They were survivors. They were fighters. And now the Empire had threatened them with extinction. He needed to warn Supreme Commander Rivan. Down in the detention level, young Lieutenant Vorash stood guard outside Taimin's cell. The duty was boring, but he took it seriously. He was a soldier of the Empire, and soldiers followed orders. Through the small window in the door, he could see the old human sitting on the metal bench that served as a bed. Taimin's eyes were closed, but Vorash didn't think he was sleeping. The human was too calm, too still. "Why aren't you afraid?" Vorash found himself asking through the door's speaker. Taimin's eyes opened slowly. He looked at the door, seeming to see through it to where Vorash stood. "Afraid of what?" "Of dying, of torture, of what's going to happen to your people." Vorash shook his head. "Every other prisoner I've guarded showed fear, but you seem almost peaceful." The old human was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and walked closer to the door. "I am afraid," he said softly, "but not for myself. I'm afraid of what I've set in motion." Vorash didn't understand. "What do you mean?" Taimin smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Tell me, young soldier, what do you know about human history?" "Nothing. We were told you're a weak species, that your civilization is primitive." "Primitive," Taimin repeated. "Perhaps. But we are very good at one thing. We are very, very good at killing." The way he said it made Vorash uncomfortable. "It's just talk," the lieutenant said. "Threats to make yourself feel better, is it?" Taimin walked back to his bench and sat down. "Let me tell you a story. When I was your age, I was a soldier in the Unification Wars. My country was fighting 3 others at the same time. We were losing. Our cities were burning. Our people were starving. So our commanders made a decision." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "We poisoned the water supply of an enemy city. 2 million people lived there. Within a week, half of them were dead. The other half surrendered unconditionally. It was horrible. It was unforgivable. But it ended that front of the war and saved millions of our own people." Vorash felt sick. "You're lying, I wish I was." Taimin met his eyes through the window. "That's what you don't understand about humans. When our survival is threatened, there is nothing we won't do. No line we won't cross. No horror we won't unleash. We learned that from fighting each other for thousands of years." The old man lay down on the bench, closing his eyes again. "Your commander thinks capturing me will make Earth surrender. He's wrong. All he's done is prove to every human alive that the Valkyrie are a threat to our existence. And when humans face extinction, we become something terrible." Vorash wanted to argue, to tell the old human he was wrong. But something in Taimin's voice, the quiet certainty, made him stay silent. The next morning, Thalek requested an urgent meeting with Supreme Commander Rivan. He was made to wait for 3 hours before being admitted to the commander's office. Rivan was reviewing battle plans, barely glancing up when Thalek entered. "What is it, intelligence officer?" "Make it quick, sir. I've been researching Earth's history." Thalek placed a data chip on the desk. I believe we've made a serious miscalculation about humanity's capabilities. Now Rivan looked up, annoyed. Miscalculation? They have 50 combat ships to our 300. Their weapons are generations behind ours. What miscalculation? Their technology may be inferior, but their capacity for violence is not. Thalek gestured to the data chip. Sir, in the last 500 years, humans have fought over 200 major wars. They've developed weapons and tactics we've never encountered. They've practiced the art of total warfare on themselves. Rivan waved his hand dismissively. Ancient history. Fighting among primitives means nothing against a real military force. But sir, the Unification Wars ended only 80 years ago. The humans who fought in that conflict are still alive. They know how to fight. More importantly, they know how to win against superior numbers. They used chemical weapons, biological agents, nuclear devices, and tactics that would be considered war crimes by any civilized species. The Supreme Commander stood up, his massive frame towering over Thalek. Are you questioning my judgment, officer? No, sir. I'm simply providing information that I believe is relevant to our military planning. The humans may not be as easy to defeat as we assume. Rivan leaned down until his face was inches from Thalek's. I don't care how many wars they fought among themselves. I don't care what primitive weapons they built. They are insects compared to the might of the Valkyrie Empire. Now get out of my office and stop wasting my time with cowardly reports. Thalek left, but not before seeing the other officers in the room smirking at his humiliation. None of them took his warning seriously. They all believed what they wanted to believe, that the humans were weak and victory would be easy. He walked through the corridors of the Crimson Spear, feeling a growing sense of dread. The Empire was making a terrible mistake, but no one would listen. There was one person who might understand. Empress Kalira was known to be more cautious than her commanders. Thalek decided to send his report directly to her, bypassing the military chain of command. It was risky and could cost him his career, but something told him this was too important to ignore. Meanwhile, in the throne room of the Imperial Palace on the Valkyrie homeworld, Empress Kalira was receiving updates on the situation with Earth. She sat on her crystal throne, listening to her advisors argue about the best way to proceed. We should attack immediately, one admiral insisted. Every day we wait gives them time to prepare. No, another countered. We should increase the pressure. Execute another human prisoner. Show them we're serious. The Empress raised her hand and the room fell silent. She had a gift for reading situations, for sensing danger that others missed. And right now, every instinct she had was screaming at her that something was wrong. Has Earth responded to our demands yet? She asked. No, Your Majesty. They've been completely silent. One of her communication officers stepped forward. In fact, it's strange. All human civilian communications have stopped. Their news broadcasts, their entertainment channels, everything has gone dark. The only signals we're detecting are heavily encrypted military transmissions. Kalira felt a chill run down her spine. That's not the behavior of a species about to surrender. That's the behavior of a species preparing for war. Your Majesty, surely you don't think these humans pose a real threat? One of her advisors asked. Our intelligence reports show them to be technologically inferior. I think, the Empress said slowly, that we know very little about these humans. We judge them based on their technology and their fleet size. But wars are not won by technology alone. They are won by will, by strategy, and by the willingness to do whatever is necessary to survive. She stood up from her throne. I want a complete analysis of human military history. I want to know how they fight, what tactics they use, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and I want it now. As her advisors scrambled to fulfill her orders, Kalira looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was preparing its response to the Empire's ultimatum. She had a terrible feeling that when that response came, it would be nothing like what Rivan and his officers expected. Back on Earth, the 72-hour deadline was approaching. Admiral Jiwoo stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing ship positions, weapon statuses, and tactical data. Everything was ready. Colonel Hyunwoo's special operations teams were in position throughout Valkyrie space. Dr. Hana's weapons were armed and ready. The fleet was deployed and waiting. Every human military asset was prepared for war. Admiral, one of her officers said quietly, the deadline expires in 10 minutes. The Valkyrie are expecting our surrender transmission. Jiwoo nodded. She had thought about this moment for 72 hours. She had considered every option, every alternative, but in the end, the choice was the Valkyrie supply convoy never saw them coming. 3 massive transport ships were moving through the Krell sector, carrying weapons and food for the Imperial forces stationed near human space. Their escort consisted of 2 destroyers, powerful ships that could handle any threat they might encounter. Or so they thought. The human ships emerged from behind a small asteroid field. They were smaller than the Valkyrie vessels, sleeker and faster. The convoy's sensors barely detected them before they struck. Admiral Jiwoo watched from her command ship as the attack unfolded. The human fighters moved like a pack of predators, coordinating their strikes with deadly precision. They didn't try to destroy the Valkyrie ships. Instead, they crippled them with targeted shots at engines and weapon systems. Within 10 minutes, the convoy was disabled and helpless. The human ships collected what supplies they needed and then vanished back into the asteroid field before Valkyrie reinforcements could arrive. "Perfect," Jiwoo said quietly. She turned to her communication officer. "Send the battle data to all fleet commanders. This is how we fight, fast strikes. Take what we need. Disappear before they can respond. Never give them a fair fight." It was the first of many such attacks. Over the next 3 days, human ships hit supply lines throughout Valkyrie space. They struck and ran, never staying long enough to be trapped, never engaging in prolonged battles. The Valkyrie fleet was larger and more powerful, but they couldn't be everywhere at once, and the humans seemed to know exactly where to strike. That was because of Colonel Hyunwoo's intelligence network. His teams had been gathering information on Valkyrie operations for years, long before the war began. Earth had known this conflict was coming. They had prepared, but Hyunwoo's teams weren't just gathering intelligence anymore. They were conducting operations that would have been called terrorism if they weren't at war. On the mining world of Vexor Prime, a team infiltrated the water treatment facility and contaminated it with a chemical that caused severe illness but wasn't fatal. Thousands of Valkyrie workers became too sick to function, halting production of critical materials. On another world, human operatives hacked into the planetary communication system and broadcast fake orders, creating confusion and chaos. Ships went to the wrong locations. Troops were deployed to non-existent threats. The Valkyrie command structure began to fracture under the strain. These weren't honorable tactics. Hyunwoo knew that. But honor was a luxury Earth couldn't afford. They were fighting for survival, and in that kind of war, anything that weakened the enemy was acceptable. Supreme Commander Rivan was furious. He watched the reports come in, each one worse than the last. The humans were like ghosts, striking everywhere and nowhere, impossible to pin down or predict. "Enough," he roared at his officers. "I want the human homeworld destroyed now. Assemble the 3rd, 5th, and 7th fleets. We're going to Earth itself. Let's see these cowards fight when their own world is at stake." Thalek, who had been standing quietly in the corner of the command center, felt his stomach drop. "Sir, is that wise? If the humans have been preparing for this war, Earth's defenses will be strong." Rivan whirled on him. "Are you questioning me again, intelligence officer? Perhaps you would like to join the human in the detention cell?" "No, sir." Thalek bowed his head, knowing it was useless to argue. The Supreme Commander had made up his mind. 3 Valkyrie fleets, nearly 100 ships in total, began moving toward the Sol system. It was the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled for a single operation. Rivan was certain that even if Earth's defenses were strong, they couldn't stand against such overwhelming power. The journey would take 5 days. During that time, the attacks on Valkyrie supply lines continued, but Rivan didn't care. Soon it wouldn't matter. Soon Earth would be ashes. On Earth, Admiral Jiwoo received word of the incoming fleet. She stood in the command center, looking at the tactical display that showed the approaching enemy. Her officers were tense, worried. They had all known this moment would come, but seeing it happen was different from planning for it. "Admiral," one of her tactical officers said nervously, "that's 3 full battle fleets, nearly 100 ships. Our entire fleet only has 47 combat vessels. Even with Earth's orbital defenses, we're outnumbered 2 to 1. Jiwoo smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Numbers aren't everything, Commander. The Valkyrie are about to learn that lesson." She pressed a button on her command console. "Activate Defense Grid Omega. Release all automated weapon platforms from storage. and send a message to our fleet, come home. It's time to show them what we've been building. Throughout the Sol system, systems that had been dormant for decades came to life. Weapon platforms that had been hidden in the asteroid belt activated their power cores. On Mars, massive railguns emerged from beneath the red sand. Jupiter's moons revealed themselves as disguised military stations, bristling with weapons. Earth hadn't just been preparing for war. They had turned their entire solar system into a fortress. Dr. Hana worked frantically in her laboratory, making final adjustments to the weapons systems. She had barely slept in days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw what her creations could do. But there was no time for doubt now. The enemy was coming. One of her assistants approached hesitantly. "Doctor, the gravity mines are in position. All systems are showing green." Hana nodded. She had designed the gravity mines herself. They were invisible to sensors and could create localized gravity wells strong enough to tear ships apart. The Valkyrie had never encountered anything like them. She felt sick thinking about what would happen when those mines activated. But what choice did they have? The Valkyrie had threatened to exterminate humanity. Every weapon she created, every deadly device, was meant to prevent that extinction. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were all crossing a line they could never uncross. 5 days later, the Valkyrie fleet entered the Sol system. On the bridge of his flagship, Rivan looked at the blue world ahead of them. Earth, so small, so vulnerable. "I see their fleet," his tactical officer reported. 47 ships positioned in a defensive formation near Earth's moon. "They're not running." "Of course they're not running," Rivan said. "They have nowhere to go. This is their last stand. Make it quick. Destroy their fleet, then bombard the planet. I want this over by nightfall." The Valkyrie fleet moved forward confidently. They had numbers. They had firepower. They had experience. What could these humans possibly do against them? The answer came when they crossed an invisible line in space. Suddenly, ships began to shake and shudder. Alarms blared across the fleet. The gravity mines had activated, creating massive gravitational anomalies that pulled Valkyrie vessels off course. Ships collided with each other. Formations broke apart. Chaos spread through the fleet. Before they could recover, the hidden weapon platforms in the asteroid belt opened fire. Thousands of projectiles streaked through space, targeting the disabled and confused Valkyrie ships. Then the railguns on Mars fired, launching massive rounds at near light speed, and finally the human fleet attacked. They didn't engage in traditional combat. Instead, they used the chaos to their advantage, picking off isolated enemy ships, targeting damaged vessels, exploiting every weakness. The battle was brutal. The Valkyrie fought back hard, their superior weapons taking a toll on the human defenders. Ships on both sides were destroyed. Thousands died in the cold vacuum of space, but the humans had prepared this battlefield. They knew where every mine was placed, where every weapon platform was hidden. They had the advantage. On his flagship, Rivan watched in disbelief as his fleet was torn apart. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to be weak, but they were fighting like demons, using tactics and weapons he had never seen before. "Pull back," he finally ordered. "Retreat to safe distance." But pulling back was harder than advancing had been. The human ships pursued them, harrying their retreat, destroying any vessel that fell behind. By the time the Valkyrie fleet escaped the Sol system, they had lost over 30 ships, nearly a third of their force. On Earth, Admiral Jiwoo surveyed the damage. They had lost 12 ships and suffered heavy casualties. But they had won. They had driven back the largest fleet the Valkyrie had ever sent against them. "Send a message to the Valkyrie fleet," she ordered. "Tell them this. Every time you come to Earth, we will be ready. Every time you attack us, we will make you bleed. You started this war. Now you will learn what it costs to fight humanity." The message was broadcast across all frequencies. The galaxy heard it. The Valkyrie heard it. And now everyone knew the truth. The humans were not prey. They were predators. And they had just drawn first blood. In his cell aboard the Crimson Spear, Taman heard the reports of the battle. He felt no joy at the human victory. Too many had died on both sides. But he knew this was only the beginning. The Valkyrie would not accept defeat. They would strike back harder. And humanity would have to match them. The war was escalating, and the worst was yet to come. The conference room was cold. Ambassador Taman sat at the long table, his weathered hands folded calmly before him. Around him stood 12 armed Valkyrie soldiers, their weapons pointed at his chest. The blue-skinned aliens towered over him, each one nearly 7 feet tall with muscles that looked carved from stone. Their red eyes watched him with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Taemin was 68 years old. His hair was completely white and deep lines marked his face. He wore simple diplomatic robes that hung loosely on his thin frame. To anyone watching, he looked like what he was, an old man, tired and frail. That was exactly what the Valkyrie saw when they looked at him. The doors burst open. Supreme Commander Rivan strode into the room, his military armor gleaming under the harsh lights. He was the largest Valkyrie Taemin had ever seen, with scars across his face that spoke of countless battles. Behind him came a dozen more officers, all wearing expressions of triumph. "So this is Earth's greatest diplomat," Rivan said, his voice booming through the room. He circled the table slowly like a predator studying prey. "This is the best humanity could send to negotiate with the Valkyrie Empire." Taemin said nothing. He simply watched the commander with steady eyes. The other Valkyrie officers laughed. One of them, a female with golden markings on her arms, stepped forward. "He looks like he might break if we breathe too hard on him." "Where are your guards, old man?" another officer asked. "Oh wait, we killed them all when we took you." "They died so easily." More laughter filled the room. Taemin remained silent, his expression unchanged. He had been a soldier long before he became a diplomat. He knew when to speak and when to wait. Rivan stopped pacing and leaned down, bringing his face close to Taemin's. "You came here thinking you could negotiate. You thought we would respect your little human government, but you don't understand how the galaxy works. The strong take what they want. The weak submit or die. I understand perfectly," Taemin said quietly. His voice was soft but clear. "That is why I came alone." This brought more laughter from the Valkyrie. Rivan straightened up, shaking his head in amusement. "Alone? Is that supposed to impress us? It only shows your weakness." The Supreme Commander walked to a control panel on the wall and pressed a button. A holographic screen appeared, showing Earth floating in the darkness of space. It looked beautiful and fragile, a blue marble suspended in the void. "Your home world," Rivan said. "It will be ours within a month. We have 300 warships ready to move. Your entire fleet couldn't stop even one of our battle groups." This meeting was never about negotiation, old man. It was about giving you a chance to surrender before we take everything. Taemin looked at the image of Earth for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made some of the officers stop laughing. "And if we refuse? Then we will burn your world," Rivan said simply. "We will destroy your cities, enslave your people, and erase your civilization from existence." "This is not a threat. This is a promise, I see." Taemin stood up slowly, his old joints creaking. The guards immediately raised their weapons, but he made no threatening moves. He simply stood there, looking at each Valkyrie officer in turn. "Then let me make you a promise in return." The room grew quieter. Something in the old man's tone cut through the mockery. "You want war?" Taemin said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "We will deliver war. But when you beg us to stop, when your worlds burn and your people scream, remember that you asked for this. Remember that we gave you a chance for peace." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Rivan threw back his head and laughed louder than before. The other officers joined in, the sound echoing off the metal walls. "Did you hear that?" Rivan gasped between laughs. "This old human threatens us. With what? Your primitive weapons? Your tiny fleet?" But one officer wasn't laughing. Intelligence Officer Thalik stood near the back of the room, watching Taemin carefully. There was something about the human's calmness that troubled him. Most prisoners showed fear, anger, or desperation. This one showed nothing but cold certainty. "Take him to a cell," Rivan ordered, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. "Broadcast his capture across the galaxy. Let every species see what happens to those who refuse the Empire. In 72 hours, we will send our demands to Earth. They will surrender, or we will show them the cost of defiance." The guards grabbed Taemin roughly and dragged him from the room. He didn't resist. As they pulled him through the doorway, he looked back at Rivan one last time. 72 hours, Taemin repeated quietly. That should be enough time. The doors closed behind him, cutting off the sounds of Valkyrie celebration. Light years away, aboard the United Earth Fleet command ship, Admiral Jiwoo watched the broadcast of Taemin's capture. Her jaw was tight, her hands clenched into fists. Around her, other officers shouted in anger and dismay. "Silence," she commanded. Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. The room fell quiet. She watched the recording again, focusing on Taiman's face, his words, his tone. She had known the old diplomat for 30 years. They had fought together during Earth's unification wars, back when humanity was still divided and destroying itself. She knew him better than anyone, and she understood his message. 72 hours, she said aloud. "Admiral," one of her officers asked. "What are your orders?" Jiwoo was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she turned to her communication officer. "Send a priority message to all fleet commanders. Code Black, begin mobilization immediately. Contact Colonel Hyunwoo and tell him to activate all special operations units. Get me Dr. Hana on a secure channel." "Code Black?" The officer's face went pale. "Admiral, that's a full war protocol." "Are you sure?" "The Valkyrie think we're weak," Jiwoo said, her voice cold as ice. "They think capturing one old man will make us surrender. They don't know that old man. They don't know us. They've made a terrible mistake, and now they're going to learn exactly what humanity is capable of." She pulled up a star map showing Valkyrie territory. Red markers indicated their military bases, supply routes, and key installations. "We have 72 hours before they send their ultimatum. That gives us time to prepare. When they demand our surrender, we're going to give them an answer they'll never forget." Across Earth and its colonies, alert sirens began to sound. Military bases went to maximum readiness. Factories that had been idle for years roared back to life, converting to war production. Ships that had been in storage for decades were pulled out and fitted with weapons. Soldiers who thought they would never see combat again received their orders and reported for duty. In a secret facility deep underground, Dr. Hana received Admiral Jiwoo's call. She listened in silence, her face growing more troubled with each passing second. When the Admiral finished speaking, Hana closed her eyes. "Are you absolutely certain?" she asked. "Once I activate these protocols, there's no going back. The weapons I've designed, they're meant to be deterrents, not tools of war." "The Valkyrie have given us no choice," Jiwoo replied. "They captured our ambassador. They're threatening to destroy Earth. They think we're prey. We need to show them the truth." Hana opened her eyes and looked at the sealed vault doors before her. Behind those doors lay humanity's darkest secrets, weapons built from lessons learned in humanity's bloodiest wars. Weapons she had hoped would never be used. "Very well," she said quietly. "I'll begin activation procedures. May we be forgiven for what comes next." Back in his cell aboard the Valkyrie flagship, Taemin sat alone in the darkness. The room was small and cold, but he didn't mind. He had spent time in worse places during the war. He closed his eyes and began to meditate, counting down the hours until the storm he had unleashed would arrive. The Valkyrie had laughed at him. They had mocked his age, his weakness, his threats. But they didn't understand. They didn't know that the fragile-looking old man they had captured was once called the Butcher of the Asian Front, a commander who had done terrible things to end an even more terrible war. They didn't know that humanity's greatest strength had always been its capacity for controlled violence. And most importantly, they didn't know that by capturing him, by threatening Earth, by demanding submission, they had done the one thing that would unite every human alive. They had given humanity a reason to go to war. The 72-hour countdown had begun. "We paid a terrible price for that mistake. Now we just want this war to end," the old diplomat nodded slowly. Then the peace treaty was signed 3 months after Taemin's release. Representatives from Earth and the Valkyrie Empire met on a neutral station, surrounded by security from a dozen other civilizations who wanted to ensure the fighting didn't start again. The terms were harsh, but fair. The Valkyrie would withdraw from all human territory. They would pay reparations for the destruction of New Hope Colony. They would provide resources to help restore Calvorn to working order. In return, humanity agreed not to deploy any more Harbinger devices and to limit testing of the solar lance to once per decade. But the galaxy had changed. Before the war, humanity was seen as a minor species, weak and insignificant. Now they were feared. Every civilization that had watched the conflict understood one terrible truth. Humans were capable of horrors that made even the most warlike races uncomfortable. Admiral Jiwoo attended the signing ceremony. She stood in her dress uniform, medals on her chest representing the victorious United Earth fleet. But she felt no pride. When she looked at Empress Kalira across the table, she saw only another leader who had sent too many people to their deaths. After the ceremony, Taemin found Jiwoo standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "We won," he said quietly. "Coming to stand beside her, did we?" Jiwoo didn't look at him. 73,000 humans dead. Hundreds of thousands of Valkyrie. We used weapons I hoped we'd never need. We proved we're just as capable of cruelty as any species out there. That doesn't feel like winning to me. Taemin was quiet for a long moment. No, it doesn't, but we survived. That has to count for something. Survival. Jiwoo's laugh was bitter. Is that all we are now? Survivors who will do anything, no matter how terrible, to keep existing? The old diplomat looked out at the stars. That's all any species is when you get down to it. We do what we must to survive. The difference is whether we learn from it or not. Whether we choose to be better than our worst moments, and how do we do that? How do we come back from what we did? We remember. We teach the next generation about the cost of war. And we work to make sure it never happens again. Taemin finally turned to look at her. I've been a soldier and a diplomat for 50 years. I've seen the worst humanity can do, but I've also seen the best. We have the capacity for great evil, yes, but also for great good. Which one we choose is up to us. Dr. Hana had returned to Earth immediately after the treaty was signed. She wanted to go home, to try to forget what she had created and what it had done, but forgetting wasn't possible. She stood in her laboratory looking at the sealed vault that contained the remaining Harbinger devices. 29 of them. 29 weapons that could destroy civilizations without killing anyone directly. She had the codes to destroy them all to make sure they could never be used again. But she couldn't bring herself to do it. What if another threat emerged? What if humanity needed these weapons again? The thought made her sick, but she couldn't ignore it. A message came through on her private channel. It was from Empress Kalira herself. Dr. Hana, I wanted to reach out to you personally. What you created, what you unleashed on my people, it was terrible. But I understand why you did it. You were protecting your home. If our positions were reversed, I would have done the same. The Empress continued. I'm proposing an exchange program between our scientists. Perhaps if we work together, we can create something other than weapons. Perhaps we can use our knowledge to build instead of destroy. Would you be willing to participate? Hana read the message 3 times. Then she wrote back a single word. Yes. Colonel Hyunwoo's special operations teams had returned home as heroes. Parades were held in their honor. They were given medals and promotions. But Hyunwoo could see the truth in his soldiers' eyes. They were haunted by what they had done. He held a private meeting with his team leaders in a secure facility. No cameras, no recordings. Just soldiers who had seen too much. I know what you're feeling, he told them. I feel it too. We did things that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. We poisoned water supplies. We caused chaos that led to deaths. We became the monsters we used to fight against. One of his officers, a young woman who had led the operation on Vexor Prime, spoke up. Then why did we do it, sir? If it makes us monsters, why did we follow those orders? Because the alternative was worse, Hyunwoo said simply. If we hadn't acted, the Valkyrie would have destroyed Earth. Billions would have died. Our entire civilization would have ended. So we did the terrible things that needed to be done. We became monsters so that others could remain human. He looked at each of them in turn, but now we have a choice. We can let what we did define us, or we can use it to become better. I'm proposing a new training program. One that focuses not just on combat effectiveness, but on ethics and consequences. Future special operations officers need to understand the full weight of their actions. Can I count on you to help me build that program? They all agreed. It wouldn't erase what they had done, but it might prevent the next generation from having to make the same choices. 6 months after the treaty, something unexpected happened. Intelligence reports indicated a new threat emerging from the far side of the galaxy. An empire called the Dominion was expanding aggressively, conquering every species in their path. Admiral Jiwoo received the reports with a sinking feeling. Here we go again, she thought. Another war. More death. More terrible choices, but then something surprising happened. A message came from Empress Kalira. Admiral, I have received the same intelligence about the Dominion. They are a threat to both our peoples. I propose an alliance. Let us face this danger together rather than separately. Jiwoo was stunned. An alliance with the Valkyrie? 6 months ago they had been trying to kill each other, but as she thought about it, she realized it made sense. The Dominion was powerful, Facing them alone would be difficult for either species. Together, they had a chance. She brought the proposal to the United Earth Council. The debate was fierce. Many council members still hated the Valkyrie for what they had done. The wounds from the war were still fresh, but Tae-min, who had been asked to advise the council, spoke up. I was captured by the Valkyrie. I was imprisoned and mistreated. I watched them threaten to destroy Earth. I have every reason to hate them. But I also understand something important. War is easy. Hatred is easy. Peace is hard. Building something better than revenge is hard. But it's the only way forward. He looked around the council chamber. The Dominion is coming. We can face them alone and possibly lose. Or we can ally with our former enemies and possibly win. But more than that, we can prove that we're more than just our capacity for violence. We can show the galaxy that humanity knows when to fight and when to build bridges. The council voted to accept the alliance. It was a narrow vote, but it passed. A month later, Lieutenant Vorash arrived on Earth as part of the first Valkyrie diplomatic delegation. He had requested the assignment specifically because he wanted to understand humanity better. His time guarding Tae-min had changed him, made him question everything he thought he knew. Tae-min met him at the spaceport. The young Valkyrie and the old human looked at each other for a long moment. Then Vorash bowed formally. Ambassador, I wanted to thank you. Our conversations during your imprisonment taught me that my people had been wrong. About humans. About the nature of strength. About a lot of things, Tae-min smiled. You were willing to listen. That takes its own kind of strength. Come, let me show you Earth. I think you'll find we're more complicated than you expected. As they walked through the city, Vorash saw something he hadn't expected. Yes, there were military installations and weapon factories. Yes, humans were clearly still preparing for possible threats. But he also saw parks where children played. He saw universities where scientists worked on peaceful research. He saw art galleries and theaters and restaurants. He saw a civilization that was more than just its weapons. You warned us that you would deliver war, Vorash said. You kept that promise, but I see now that you're also capable of peace. Of creation. Of beauty, Tae-min nodded. That's the lesson my people learned the hard way during our own wars. We're capable of great evil when threatened, but we're also capable of great good when given the chance. The trick is remembering both and choosing wisely. When the Dominion's emissaries finally arrived, demanding submission from both Earth and the Valkyrie Empire, they found something unexpected. A joint human-Valkyrie fleet waiting to greet them, a unified command structure, and a warning delivered by Admiral Jiwoo and Empress Kalira together. Our peoples fought a terrible war, Jiwoo said. We hurt each other badly, but we learned from it. Now we stand together. Attack one of us and you fight both of us. And you should know, we have proven we will do whatever is necessary to protect our people. The Dominion emissaries had studied the recent war. They had seen what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. They had seen the Harbinger devices and the solar lance. They had watched a civilization that seemed primitive completely destroy a much larger enemy. They decided that conquering this alliance would cost more than it was worth. The Dominion proposed a non-aggression pact and trade agreements instead. Peace through strength. It wasn't perfect, but